This is Central, your local independent TV station. It's time now for the ITN Morning News.
Good morning. The time is 5 o'clock on Sunday, the 13th of November. The headlines this morning. Police in the Caribbean are hunting gunmen who murdered a British holidaymaker. And a new report suggests the crew of the Space Shuttle Challenger lived for more than 2 minutes after their craft exploded. Also this morning, how George Bush won the election to become the 41st President of the United States, one of the reports in our review of the week's news. And a 16-year-old girl killed in Californian gang warfare, a report from American television. Now the main news. Police on the Caribbean island of St. Lucia are this morning hunting an armed gang who shot dead a British holidaymaker after holding up a party of tourists, including 36 Britons. Many of the Britons are expected to cut short their holiday and return home later today. The dead man was 51-year-old Leonard Wiseman from Hinckley in Leicestershire.
To the shock of the government and St. Lucians, we are told that they were held up, robbed, a bullet was fired and someone was killed. This matter is under investigation.
Have the police been able to help the family of Mr. Wiseman who was killed?
Yes, indeed. The widow has been taken care of. At the moment, she is in close contact with the British government representative.
How many officers you have involved in this investigation?
Oh, it's quite a lot, which is headed under myself. It's headed by me, the acting deputy. It has been vigorously pursued.
In the United States, a newspaper report claims the 7 astronauts aboard the Space Shuttle Challenger were conscious for up to 2.5 minutes after it blew apart in 1986. The report, quoting unnamed space agency investigators, says the astronauts could have survived if their compartment had landed gently on the ocean. The US space agency NASA maintains the astronauts died instantly. The claim comes as final preparations get underway for the launch of the shuttle Atlantis from the Kennedy Space Center later this month. NASA has refused to make public the tapes that recorded the final moments of the Challenger crew, saying it would cause too much stress to their families. A coroner has ordered an investigation into claims by 3 doctors at an accident unit that the death toll in the King's Cross disaster could be higher than believed. The doctors saw parts of a body in the ticket hall a few hours after the fire. They say the body was not one of the 31 known dead. Patients at the Leavesden Psychiatric Hospital in Watford have spent a second night sleeping on mattresses on the floor after nurses continue to sit-in. Protests over pay and regrading have also hit hospitals in Mid and South Glamorgan, Manchester and Epsom. Terry Lloyd reports.
The series of sit-ins began here at Leavesden Psychiatric Hospital near Watford. Earlier, nurses started a work-to-grade protest. That escalated when 50 low-grade staff insisted that the rules stated they needed supervision. Without it, they began their sit-in, which forced management to close 4 wards at the 875-bed hospital. That meant about 50 mentally handicapped patients were moved into an assembly hall where they slept overnight on mattresses. Management, who say they coped well last night, are now appealing to the nurses to end the dispute.
The hospital doesn't want to have to cope. We have 700 nursing posts here, and we would hope that the services that the hospital has provided for 117 years here can continue without interruption.
But as the night shift arrived, thoughts of an early end were dashed.
Evening, do you think there will be a sit-in tonight?
Yes.
I think so, yes.
The dispute's going to be a lengthy one?
Oh, yes.
Probably.
Yes.
Will there be another sit-in tonight?
Yes.
So the dispute's continuing?
Yes.
And will it get worse or better?
Well, I think it was.
What's also concerning management is that bitterness is now growing between nurses who are working and those who are sticking to the rule book. Terry Lloyd, ITN, at Leavesden Hospital.
4 people are missing, feared dead after a fire sank a British yacht off Portugal. Michael Beresford, the Essex man who owned the yacht Atherina, was rescued. He says the vessel was hijacked by 2 British men and 2 women who refused to leave when the fire broke out. The accident happened at 70 miles from the port of Aveiro. A Royal Navy ship joined a search, but it's now been called off. Severe storms in Spain have left at least 3 people dead, with hundreds more evacuated. Near Valencia, a woman and her 2 young daughters were swept to their deaths when their car was caught in floods. Barcelona Airport was also closed for a time. Police are this morning watching ports and airports with a missing farm worker wanted for questioning in connection with the disappearance of schoolgirl Anna Humphreys. David Evans vanished from his home in North Wales only hours after Anna had gone missing. Detectives believe he has his passport with him. Mark Webster reports.
Hundreds of volunteers, including friends of Anna's family, joined the search. They scoured fields and hedgerows for 3 miles around the girl's home for clues to her disappearance. Police and mountain rescue services are coordinating the search from Penley Village Hall, so far without success. But police said they were encouraged by the reaction of the public.
I can only say that the response from the general public has been tremendous. It's a close-knit community, and certainly it's helped in that regard. I've never seen anything like it.
Police said David Evans has his passport, and they've contacted air and seaports. His green Allegro car has now undergone a full forensic examination. Anne's family appealed to him to come forward and spoke of their 4 days of agonized waiting.
Any family knows what we've probably been going through. But in fact, with our friends, here with us at present, we have a number of friends who have been with us this morning, but are now with the search parties. It's all is very helpful to us.
Frogmen have been searching every pond and river in the area.
The Queen will this morning be at the annual Remembrance Day service at the Cenotaph after attending the annual Poppy Day Festival at the Albert Hall last night. Newspaper reports have suggested that the Duchess of York was not expected, but the Royal British Legion insists they knew she'd be there. It was a time to remember as millions of poppy petals fell on the audience, one for each British serviceman killed in action since the First World War. 6 little toddlers have been celebrating their 2nd birthday, and they're all brothers and sisters. They're the Coleman sextuplets from Essex.
Having one baby can be a handful. When the Coleman sextuplets arrived 2 years ago, it was the start of sleepless nights and endless nappies 6 times over. Somewhat bigger and known affectionately as the hooligans, they got on with opening the cards and playing with the presents while their parents reflected on the chaos that rules their lives.
There's never enough money, and there's never enough time. I mean, you're always busy. I mean, it's about 7:30 at night is perfect, and everybody's in bed fast asleep.
You might be fed up with them all, but you've only got to come in and one puts their arm around you and gives you a kiss, and you just forget everything. Super.
Happy birthday, dear Gary, Hannah, Nicola, Jane, Stuart, Jane. Happy birthday to you.
After the break, we'll have our review of the week's main news at home and abroad, including reports on last Tuesday's American presidential election.
A 26-inch My Pet Monster at $29.99. Just one of a range of terrifyingly cuddlesome monsters. At Gateway Superstores this Christmas.
Get the Buzz, the national chatline service.
Well, hello.
Phone now. 0898 444 898.
The future is closer than we think. See it recorded with Hinari Televideo. Advanced 21-inch flatter, squarer tube and built-in Japanese video with 8-hour record. all controlled from your armchair using a single programmable LCD remote control. Inari Televideo, available this very day from these far-sighted companies. Inari, here comes the future.
The big name in home fashion brings you perfectly coordinated home furnishings. Shalimar, from Colorol, of course.
Welcome back. It's 10 minutes past 5 now for our Sunday morning review of the week's news. The main story abroad was, of course, the American presidential election, which made George Bush the first vice president to be voted into the White House in 150 years. He won despite a last-minute dash around the country by his Democratic rival Michael Dukakis. News at 1 had these first reports of the Bush victory.
George Bush and his future First Lady went to share their moment of triumph with ecstatic Republican supporters in the Houston Convention Center. It was a historic victory, the first time a serving vice president's been elected president for 150 years. Mr. Bush was joined on stage by his family, sons, daughter, and grandchildren. This has been a bruising campaign, but any trace of animosity was gone now.
I've just received a telephone call from Governor Dukakis. And I want you to know he was most gracious. His call was personal. It was genuinely friendly. And it was in the great tradition of American politics.
And the vice president's been accused of negative, even dirty tactics over the past weeks, but he clearly hopes to put that quickly behind him.
And when I said I want a kinder, gentler nation, I meant it, and I mean it. A campaign is a disagreement, and disagreements divide. But an election is a decision, and decisions clear the way for harmony and peace. And I mean to be a president of all the people, and I want to work for the hopes and interests not only of my supporters, but of the governors and of those who didn't vote at all. To those who supported me, I will try to be worthy of your trust, and to those who did not, I will try to earn it, and my hand is out to you, and I want to be your president too. Thank you all.
But George Bush faces many challenges, not least following Ronald Reagan, a popular and charismatic president who displayed an ability to win over political opponents. Mr. Bush may not find that so easy. The Republicans are celebrating 4 more years in the White House, but there will be difficulties on the path ahead. George Bush has faced much criticism for the nature of his campaign, but that hardly matters to these Republicans now. But there will be a price to pay, not least in his relations with Congress. He's won the election, now he must heal the wounds and unite the nation behind him. Tim Hewitt, ITN, with the next president in Houston, Texas.
In Boston, for the Democrats with Michael Dukakis, it was a far from ignominious defeat, but it was not a happy night either. The balloons were up with nowhere to go, the faces long. For in winning any states, the suggestion lingered that if he had displayed the fight of the final days earlier, he might yet have won. The Dukakis family left home in mid-evening to witness the acceptance of defeat. 2,000 miles south in Texas, Lloyd Bentsen savored his Senate victory. Indeed, the Democrats have done well in both the Senate and congressional races, and President Bush will be badly handicapped by both. Bentsen was the great success of this campaign and paid handsome tribute to his running mate.
I have never seen a candidate that worked any harder, or in those last 3 or 4 weeks delivered a message any stronger than did Mike Dukakis in those closing days. And he made me proud to be his father.
Back in Boston, before midnight, Michael Dukakis arrived to concede defeat officially. He came with dignity and without emotion, the reminder of strong family bonds, prefacing his bid
to unite behind the man who defeated him in what many observers have described as one of the dirtiest presidential campaigns on record.
Just a few minutes ago, I called Vice President Bush and congratulated him on his victory. And I know I speak for all of you and for all the American people when I say that he will be our president, and we'll work with him. This nation faces major challenges ahead, and we must work together.
92, they shouted, urging him to run again, but he would only talk of this campaign.
Thank you.
As the Dukakis family left the hall, his mother was questioned by an American reporter.
Mr. Dukakis, would you like to see him run again in 92?
No. In the end, his concession speech was probably one of the best he ever delivered during the whole campaign. And that was perhaps the essence of his problem, that he was really only capable of fighting when the odds were greatest against him. And in the end, it all came far too late to make the crucial difference. Jon Snow, ITN, with the Dukakis campaign in Boston.
You're watching a review of the week from ITN. Politicians around the world congratulated Mr. Bush. Mrs. Thatcher, who will meet him in Washington this week, said his victory meant a continuation of policies that would give Europe enormous confidence. Peter Allen reported British reactions for News at 1.
Mrs. Thatcher stayed up until 5 a.m. this morning to be quite sure that George Bush had won. And just after 6, she was on the phone to him to express her delight at the victory.
I wanted to be among the first to congratulate him. I've known him quite a long time and was able to get him and congratulate him on the result and campaign. He's looking forward to meeting. We're meeting next week when I go across to Washington. So am I.
Would he be easier to handle than Mr. Reagan?
You don't handle United States presidents. You offer them your support for policies in which you both believe.
To Mrs. Thatcher, the result means the special relationship she's established with Ronald Reagan can continue. The opposition parties are less enthusiastic.
Well, I congratulate President Bush and wish him well in office, especially in dealing with two major challenges. The first, to follow in the footsteps of Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev with their disarmament initiatives. And secondly, to apply an economic policy that will succeed in reducing America's huge trade deficit.
I'm obviously disappointed because I would have preferred Mr. Dukakis, but I think it has given little grace the whole campaign to the democratic process. It's been a grubby campaign. Perhaps more important than that, Mr. Bush, in attacking his opposition, has not staked out his own ground and therefore cannot claim a mandate in what is going to be a very difficult period for the United States. I think we're in for a fairly tough time.
One American who's going to have an easier time earning a living with Mr. Bush in the White House is Rich Little. He's a satirist who impersonates presidents in his nightclub act, and he says the new man in the White House is going to be a barrel of laughs.
The 40th President of the United States, Ronald Reagan.
Well, Mr. President? Yes.
For 8 years, Rich Little has delighted his fans and earned a fortune with his impression of Ronald Reagan.
I'll memorize them. I'll get it perfect. Trust me.
Now he must take on a new president. For him, George Bush makes a better impression than Mike Dukakis.
He isn't exactly Mr. Excitement. You know, he's the kind of guy you'd like to have around when you want to be alone. You know, with a little effort, he could become a non-entity. Out of the two, I'd have to go with George Bush. Because George has kind of a whiny quality when he talks.
Who, of the presidents that you've been able to do, I mean, is there one who is absolutely the guy that you...
Well, of course, I was always known in the early days for doing Richard Nixon. Because of the cheeks and the looking through the tops of the eyes, you know, and the jowls and everything. I had great fun doing Trekkie Decky. And then, of course, Jimmy Carter, hot damn, you know, everything was just great with Jimmy. I'd like to tell you about my accomplishments as president. Have you got a second? I just made that up. Hot damn.
You're watching a review of the week from ITN. In London, the official report into the fire at King's Cross Underground Station was published a year after the disaster in which 31 people died. The two top transport managers resigned shortly before its publication. One of them said it was an emotive document. The report blames the two men for complacency towards passenger safety.
At 7:45 on November the 18th last year, a fire which had smouldered for about 20 minutes on an escalator at King's Cross suddenly erupted, claiming the lives of 31 people in the ticket hall above and leaving a dozen more with serious injuries. The report says it was probably started unwittingly as a smoker dropped a lighted match on a wooden escalator. It went down through a gap at the side where a seal was missing and set light to 1/3 of a ton of fluff and grease, coating machinery that hadn't been properly cleaned in living memory. Within minutes, the flames took hold. The reason there was an explosion of fire was because the shaft acted like a huge chimney, with air rushing up from the bottom, flattening the flames and hot gases, so that instead of dispersing, they simply heated the steps above until they were hot enough to ignite almost instantly, leaving those above with virtually no chance of escape. Desmond Fennell's report recommends the biggest shake-up in the underground since it was founded 125 years ago. It demands the replacement of all wooden escalator parts, most by next July, and says fire-resistant grease must be used on all machinery. It wants new litter laws and a ban on the sale of cigarettes and matches at tubes. More heat and smoke detectors are recommended, linked to automatic alarms and sprinklers. Station plans and keys to locked exits must be easily accessible. Public address systems and closed-circuit television should be improved. Ordinary staff must have fire training every 6 months, and evacuation exercises involving the emergency services and public should be held twice a year. And in future, the fire brigade will supervise safety on the tubes. The report says Sir Keith Bright was fundamentally in error and criticises him for trying to blame an arsonist. He and the underground chief, Tony Ridley, who went this morning, are accused of failing to ensure safety on the tubes under existing laws, and of failing to treat safety as importantly as efficiency and economy. Today, Dr. Ridley called the report a motive, but those who lost relatives now have a different concern.
We are worried that, yes, at the moment, LRT are doing things, but when the fuss dies down, they will just revert back to old ways.
All of Mr. Fennell's 157 recommendations are aimed at ensuring London Underground never goes back to its old ways. He says if his report reminds people that above all they must place safety first, it will have achieved its goal.
Earlier in the week, the government published its proposals for deregulating broadcasting. They include a 5th television channel and several hundred more local radio stations. This report from Penny Marshall for the 5:45 News.
The Home Secretary set out for the Commons with plans for the most radical overhaul of British broadcasting since independent television began. At long last, the plans for television and radio made public, plans which will completely reshape the industry and its programmes, affecting broadcasters and viewers and more than doubling the number of TV channels available next year with a single stroke. First, there's to be a new national commercial channel, Channel 5, to be launched in 1990, plus possibly one more later. New local community stations will also be introduced, heralding a new era for regional programming. These will be in addition to 5 new satellite stations, 2 new ones announced this afternoon. And because these will compete directly with the ITV channels for viewers and revenue, ITV is to be restructured. The Independent Broadcasting Authority is to be abolished and a new commercial television commission formed with a lighter regulatory touch. ITV will be relieved of some of its public service requirements, although a high-quality international news service like ITN's will remain. The ITV franchises will be sold off to the highest bidder. ITV's nighttime slot will be sold off, and ITV will be renamed Channel 3. The BBC also comes under scrutiny, although nothing immediate is planned. There's a warning that its present funding, that's the licence fee, will be reviewed. Alternatives must be examined, namely subscription, and one of the BBC's nighttime franchises is to be sold off. The funding of Channel 4 will also be changed. The range of options to be discussed centre on how this can be done without affecting its special programme remit. It may well be separated from ITV. And independent radio gets the green light to expand. There'll be 3 new national channels and hundreds of new local stations launched. But will all these new channels lead to a decline in programme quality, as the opposition today warned? The government says not.
I think that viewers and listeners themselves will insist on higher quality, and it'll be gradually more and more their choice, rather than the detailed regulations of the regulators, which will call the tune.
There's no protection in the White Paper at all against international media moguls getting their grip on huge amounts of British television. There's a paragraph which says, wouldn't it be awful if they did? But that paragraph ends with an invitation. Can anybody think of a way of stopping them?
The Speaker of the West German Parliament resigned the day after saying many Germans thought Hitler's Third Reich was glorious and that Jews had deserved to be put in their place. Herr Jenninger made his speech on the 50th anniversary of the start of Nazi persecution of Jews.
Philipp Jenninger resigned and left office without saying a word. In a written statement, though, he said he did not want to damage the office of President of the Bundestag, and he felt that he'd lost the trust of many of his colleagues. In a speech made on his behalf at the German Parliament, the acting Vice President of the Bundestag, Anne-Marie Renger, said Herr Jenninger's remarks had not been understood by many people, and that he deeply regretted causing offence to anyone. What he had in fact said was that Hitler's rule was glorious in the eyes of many Germans, who also saw the early years of the Third Reich as a triumphal procession. He said, hadn't the Jews before the war, as had been suggested, assumed a role beyond their station? Wasn't it about time they were curbed? Hadn't they perhaps deserved to be put in their place? That sparked the walkouts by MPs and widespread condemnation of the speech. Had he not resigned today, a campaign to oust him would have been promised. The speech was made on the 50th anniversary of Kristallnacht, the Night of Glass, so called because of the streets being strewn with broken glass on the night that marked the start of the pogrom against the Jews in Germany. It was a cleverly orchestrated campaign of hatred by the Nazis, who led the country to believe the Jews were responsible for the nation's problems. Herr Jenninger yesterday said anti-Semitism had existed in Germany and elsewhere long before Hitler. His claim later that he'd been actively working for the reconciliation with the Jewish community and for the vital interests of the State of Israel were by then too late to save his political career.
After the break, the latest reports from American television with more on that gang warfare in Los Angeles, as well as the main news and sport.
As there is fab for the Yuletide bags. Tom the Tank Henge for little Don. Ho, ho, ho! The Arsenal really should get some younger players. Now, something for Harry-sided doors. Lammy!
Lumley.
Oh, Stavros, very pleased for to make you acquaint.
Yes, it is quaint, isn't it?
Oh la la! The nappy Lynch. They got anything for the larger lady?
I wouldn't know.
Now, I'm got my fresh Oyster Turk.
And I'm going to make some fresh cranberry sauce.
Is a go together like carriage and horse. Quite. You know, for me, the Perth Christmas is a feed-up, telly on, watch my husband and I, with the Asda Whiskey Dundee cake.
I just love smoked salmon.
I would prefer smoked cigar.
Asda, one trip and you're laughing.
You know the best thing about Asda late night shop?
We'll meet such interesting people.
You pay the worst for my gob.
Introducing Ross Recipe Fish. You'll get hooked on Recipe Fish Cod Crumble, Recipe Fish Ocean Pie, new Recipe Fish Paella, and new Recipe Fish Prawn Risotto. Catch a deliciously different one every day or night. Ross Recipe Fish. Pick up the phone now and call Chatterbox on 0898